Hello, my friends. Miss Story Mystery here with another collection of creepy tales of mysteries and oddities. In this episode, I'll be telling several true strange stories, including the paranormal experiences of a hostess at an old restaurant, sharing a home with a ghost who loves big band music, and hearing unexplained noises while staying at a haunted hotel. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these tales brought to you by yours truly. When I was a kid, I used to stand at the top of the stairs in my house. I would close my eyes and say, "I'm ready." My eyes would remain closed and I would float down the stairs. I'd open my eyes when I was at the bottom of the stairs. I'd say, "Thank you," and walk away. It was like a game I'd play with what I'm guessing was a ghost in my house. I remember doing it at least a dozen times. Watching a movie at the theater a few months ago. Right before the movie started, saw a transparent figure of a little boy around 7 to 8 standing right in front of me, between me and the back of the seat in front, so very close. Though I can't see his expression, I felt like he was looking at me curiously. The figure was gone after 10 seconds or so. My sister and I were staying at an old historic hotel in the middle of nowhere, Montana. The building had been in use since the 1800s. My sister loves this place and has frequented it many times over the years. I was kept up all night by someone pacing around on the hardwood floors in the room above ours. Drove me crazy. In the morning, I asked my sister how she could sleep through it, and she told me that the upstairs of the building used to be a ballroom, but now it's carpeted and empty. The hotel staff confirmed that nobody was up there, and furthermore, if they were, I wouldn't have heard heels on hardwood floor. When I was around 6 or 7, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment. My brother, 11 or 12, sister, 5 or 6, and I all shared the smaller bedroom. Every night for several months, Mom would come in to tuck us in, kiss us goodnight, and sing to us until we fell asleep. She would sing stuff from Sesame Street, like Ernie's Rubber Ducky song or Cookie Monster's Cookie song. She also sang You Are My Sunshine a lot. I asked Mom about it when I was in high school and asked her why she stopped doing that when we moved to a new house. She got really uncomfortable and said, "I have to tell you something." One morning, she said, my sister had thanked her for tucking us in the night before, and could she please sing the cookie song again? Mom asked her what she was talking about, and my sister, brother, and I all confirmed that the night before she had come in to sing to us. Guys, my mom had never done that. Ever. My stepdad has even confirmed this. Neither of them had any idea why we would think she was in our room after we went to bed, especially on nights she was working. This wasn't the first or only time people had seen or heard Mom and stepdad in that apartment when they were actually somewhere else. But it's definitely the creepiest. Woke up in the middle of the night, hearing footsteps pacing outside my room and up the stairs. Listened for a few minutes, trying to figure out if it was my dad or my brother. My bedroom door was open, and I could faintly see a man walking, but couldn't get a glimpse of him. Said man walked into my room, stood at the foot of my bed. We locked eyes, and both looked equally terrified. I wanted to scream, but I was stunned. The man, with eyes wide open, started to fade away. Like actually fade away like a freaking movie effect. To this day, I still have no idea what that was about. At that point, I was awake enough to not be half dreaming. My old apartment was haunted by a short, elderly, balding man who I'd often see glimpses of out of the corner of my eye, and when I'd look straight at him, he'd disappear. I occasionally like to listen to big band music from the 30s and 40s, and sometimes I'd hear someone tapping their foot to the music in the room. If I muted the music, the tapping would continue for a couple seconds, then stop. A few times I heard a tremendous crash from my bedroom that sounded like my bookshelf had fallen over, but when I ran in to look, there was nothing out of place. I also had full cans of pop, soup, etc., sometimes fall over on a completely flat counter. Most of the time, I just heard it happen or found the cans on their side, but once it happened right in front of me. I moved about 6 years ago, and nothing like this has happened since. I was down in the basement at my dad's house about 8 years ago doing some things in the back workroom. All of a sudden, I hear a little kid's voice say my name. Hairs instantly stand up, get a chill, got that feeling behind my neck where it feels like needles or something prickly is back there. Fast forward a few months later. My nephew, 5 years old, and sister come to visit from Las Vegas. My sister and I are giving him a bath, and he stops playing in the tub and stares towards the door. He says, "Don't leave me in here alone. I'm scared." We ask why, and he proceeds to say, "The little boy Mikey is in here. He lives in the basement with his parents." I still get the creeps from that basement. When I was little, I absolutely hated thunderstorms. I'd be scared to death and would beg to sleep with my mom and dad. Sometimes I didn't want to wake them up, so I just tiptoed into their room and slept on the floor on my mom's side of the bed, and I felt safe knowing she was right there. My parents' room was directly across a long hallway from my room, so it was just a long, straight line past a bathroom to get there. One night, when I was probably about 8 or 9, there was a very bad thunderstorm, and I was woken up by thunder and immediately got out of bed and decided I was going to sleep with Mom and Dad, and so I crept out of my room and tiptoed down the hallway. I probably got about 3 feet from my parents' door when I saw 3 very small apparitions in front of my parents' door. And this sounds nuts, but they were lion-like creatures with sharp teeth and really cloudy eyes. They were snarling at me and guarding my parents' doorway, and I felt such intense fear that if I tried getting past them, something terrible would happen. So I ran back to my room and rode out the storm in my own bed. This happened a couple times that summer. I saw the little transparent creatures outside my parents' bedroom, and I never slept with them again. Eventually I got older, completely forgot about that, and I never saw them as a teenager or an adult, and if I did recall it, I probably wrote it off as childhood imagination. But here's the part that gives me chills. Years later, when I was in high school, we had a family barbecue, and all my aunts and cousins were over, and the little cousins were playing hide and seek. My cousin Samantha, who was probably about 8 at the time, came running outside crying hysterically, and we all asked her what was wrong. Her response almost made me throw up. She said she was hiding in my parents' room, and she got attacked by a little lion ghost. The adults all chuckled and told her to go sit down and relax, but I lost my effing shit and went pale and had to go for a walk. This happened to me for like a year when I was 16. Every night at exactly 10 p.m., I'd hear scratching on my window. I would just ignore it because I was too scared to acknowledge it. I had blinds, so couldn't see outside, and wasn't brave enough to look. One night, though, it was particularly loud, and I went and got my dad to look out. Turns out, it was a neighbor's cat that would sit outside on my windowsill at the exact same time every night. 4 years ago, I moved into my first apartment. It was a small studio with no bedroom door. It was the first time I've ever lived on my own, and I brought my 2 cats with me. I had a long mirror hanging on my closet door. Many nights I felt like something dark was in the mirror and was watching me. I kept telling myself that it was my mind, and this was the first time living on my own, and I was just trying to get used to things. The sight and feeling happened most nights. One day I was sitting on my couch and heard a rustling noise and looked over at my trash can. It was a swing lid, and I watched it swing to the right, then to the left, and then it stopped. I walked over to inspect. No air vent was hitting it. Both cats were in the bedroom, and there wasn't any trash inside. I thought it was strange, but pushed it out of my mind. A couple months later, a friend and her 3-year-old daughter came over, and we hung out on my patio. Her daughter kept going in and out of my apartment, shutting the sliding glass door behind her each time. After a while, she ran to the glass door in a panic and opened it, jumped out and slammed it shut, then threw a rock at the glass door. We asked her what was wrong and what scared her. We asked her if the cat scared her or a spider. She simply replied, "Ghost." I was stunned. I hadn't told anyone what was going on before this. After a while, things started to happen more and more. My cats would fight on my bed or be doing something on my bed, and then all of a sudden would stop and look at the top left corner of my bedroom simultaneously. It would always be the left corner. I always checked to see if it was a bug or dust or anything else, and it wasn't. They would be facing the opposite direction and then both turn and look at that corner. One day I went into my bedroom to get a winter headband from my closet. I looked at my bed before walking into the closet, and for some reason made a mental note that my bed was made and nothing but 2 pillows were on it. I'm normally a messy person. I walked in my closet knowing the headband was there because I saw it the day before. I couldn't find it and said, "Screw it, I'll just wear the hat I found." I turned and walked out of the closet, and draping off the side of the bed, right in front of the closet door, was my headband. As time went on, I became more and more freaked out, so I started sleeping with the bathroom light on. I woke up one night and felt 2 very light footprints at the end of my bed. I looked around and saw one cat fast asleep in the cat tree in the corner, and the other fast asleep next to my pillow. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the corner of my comforter flip up. Then, all of a sudden, it felt like a large hand grabbed the right side of my face, and I felt like I was spinning and felt sick and kept trying to force my eyes open, but I couldn't. It had to have been for 15 seconds, but it felt longer. Finally, I was able to open my eyes, and the spinning and ill feeling stopped. Shortly after, I felt 2 light footprints at the end of my bed again. Things would happen, and then nothing for a couple of months. One night I woke up and saw my hairbrush and night cream slam onto the ground. At first, I thought it was my older cat because she liked to knock things over to wake me up. I kept calling her name, and my younger cat walked in from the living room to inspect what was going on. I kept calling my older cat's name and peered into the living room and saw her, and she wouldn't come into the room. She looked scared. To further explain why it wouldn't be anything else, my bathroom countertop had a round curve that went upwards, so something couldn't easily slide off. I had also closed the vent in my bathroom because it would blow hot air onto my hair products. After some time, I rented a bigger apartment in that complex. I went to the first one to clean the bathroom and was there by myself. A figure walked past the door. After moving into my second apartment, the realization that I was being followed by the spirit came to light. It knocked on my door, and without realizing it, I let it in. Thus, more things have happened, and now, living in a townhouse, It still appears every so often. 15 years old. I had just got home from work, so I went to my bedroom to change out of my work clothes and get ready for bed. I'm in the middle of undressing when I look to my bedroom window to catch my reflection, and I see a man's face. I dropped to the floor and turned off the lights, scrambling to get dressed, still watching the window. The face is gone, but I'm still watching. Then, an effing camera. No face, just a camera pointed at me sitting on the floor. I bolt from my room and tell my mom and brother. My brother went outside, and our ladder from the backyard was lying there, but nobody around. Couldn't sleep for a year after that. Just stared at that window. A few years ago, my roommate at the time and I were driving to McDonald's through the back roads from our college apartment, and we were passing through a neighborhood. As we were driving past one house, a young boy ran out in front of my car chasing after a ball, so I slammed on the brakes to stop short and not hit the boy. When I had fully come to a stop, my roommate and I looked up to make sure everything was okay, but there was no boy or any child. We had both seen the exact same thing, and to this day have no idea what it was. About 15 years ago, I was staying in the old hotel in French Lick, Indiana. It was March and cold, and very few people were staying there. My husband and I went to bed. He was soon asleep, but I couldn't sleep for the noise in the hall outside. There were children playing, bouncing a ball. It was getting late, after 11 p.m., and I was getting irritated that the parents were letting their children run amok in the hall. Finally, I decided to do something about it. I swung my legs out of bed and stood up. The noise abruptly stopped, like someone lifted a needle off a record. When I went to the door and opened it, no one was there. I still am not sure what to make of it. Back when I was in high school theater, our director had warned us our theater was haunted by the original theater teacher, and we didn't believe him. One night after everyone had left, I was tidying up the stage. I saw the silhouette of someone in the lighting booth. I assumed it was Ben, the lighting guy. I shouted to him that I was leaving, and the silhouette waved back. Suddenly, all of the lights started going crazy. There was a setting on the switchboard that made all the lights do that. We called it the party button. Once I got home, I texted Ben and asked when he left, and he said that he left an hour before I did, and that I would have been the only one in the theater. I started freaking out. Next morning, I went up to the booth to check the computer's log of lighting directions and saw that there was no record of anyone clicking the party button. They had just done that by themselves. Used to not believe in anything supernatural, but I've since changed my mind. I live alone with my cat in an apartment. One night, after having a few drinks, I woke up in the middle of the night to go use the restroom. I go to the restroom, then walk back into my room, and notice my guitar is sitting leaned up against my desk. I don't like to leave it out, so I decide to put it back in the case. I turn my desk lamp on, which has one of those bulbs that is very dim at first and gets brighter after a few minutes. So, I pick up my guitar and reach under my bed to get the guitar case. At this point, it is still very dark in my room, but I can see just enough to put my guitar in the case. As I am kneeling next to my bed, putting my guitar in the case, I see a small moving object under my bed. I look at it, and in the darkness I can make out what looks like a cat head. I figured it was my cat, because he always goes under my bed. I think nothing of it and say, "Hey, kitty." I put my guitar in the case and lean the case against the wall. As I turn around to turn my desk lamp back off, I see my cat enter into my room from the door, which is across the room from the bed. To this day, I don't know what I saw under my bed. I woke up at night for a glass of water. I walked to the kitchen and ran into my dad. He walked right past me to the front door. He didn't even acknowledge me being there. I asked him, "Where are you going?" He didn't say anything, just had a blank stare and walked out the door. I walked over and looked out the window peephole on the door. We had a small walkway that connected to our driveway. He was sitting on the walkway, hunched over, elbows on his knees, under a big tree that was in front of my bedroom, just staring into nothing. I walked into my mom's bedroom and asked her why my dad was outside. She turned over and said, "What do you mean? He's right here." There was my dad, laying by my mom's side in a deep sleep. I was 13, almost 14 at the time, and my mom and I decided to stay at my grandma's house for Christmas that year. My grandma is the typical cute little old lady with a crap ton of porcelain figures and cute stuff all over the house. But her absolute favorite things to decorate with are wind chimes. Anyway, we get there and everything is cool for a couple of days. My aunt and uncle are staying there too, so the house is pretty crowded, and my mom and I are sharing a room. It's the night or two before Christmas, and I'm up reading in bed with my flashlight, and I start hearing what sounds like a cat meowing. At first, I brush it off, thinking that it's a stray outside or something, but then it starts to sound like it's coming down the hallway until it eventually stops at the foot of the bed. At this point, I'm super scared, because I know my grandma doesn't have a cat. The meowing continues for a minute or two, and then I work up the courage to wake up my mom. No shit, it effing stopped the second she woke up and started back again right after she started snoring. When it started back up again, though, the meows got deeper and deeper in pitch until it sounded like a really deep growl. This went on for another few minutes, and then, when it finally stopped, I heard what sounded like a small child running down the hallway, and all of the wind chimes in the hall, living room, and foyer started chiming like it brushed past them on its way out. Ever since, every so often late at night, I will randomly feel terrified for no reason. It's not like I'm just a little scared, but more like a really intense feeling of dread. It sucks. I was living out in a rainforest in Costa Rica a couple of years ago, and one night I woke up to a really peculiar and sort of frightening noise. It was a sort of deep droning hum mixed with a metallic rattling noise that began off in the distance, then grew closer and louder until it sounded like it was within 100 feet of me, then passed and faded off into the distance the other way. I suppose it could have been some kind of airplane. It didn't sound like any kind of airplane I could recognize, and I don't know why it would be flying so low and in such a remote part of the jungle at 2 a.m. My kids are upstairs asleep. My husband is in our room on the other side of the house asleep. I am in the media room watching a movie on my TV. My husband and I are console gamers who won't play split screen, so we have 2 large flat screen TVs mounted to the wall next to each other. They take up the whole wall. Mine is on the right. When you come into the media room, the TVs are on the wall to the left. I am sitting with my back to the door. The only door to the media room is off a narrow hallway and is the first door on the right when coming down the hallway from the living room. There is a small lamp on in the living room, so there is ambient light from the hallway. My husband's TV is off, and there are no lights on in the media room, which means his TV is one big black reflective surface. I'm watching my show when I see a shadow reflected in my husband's TV that is large enough to be my 6'3" husband lean around and look in the media room door for a few seconds. When he doesn't say anything, I look around, but no one is there. I immediately get up and walk down the hall into the living room. No one is there. Go to the stairs and see that both of the children's doors are shut. I would have heard them on the stairs anyway. Go directly across the house to find my husband sound asleep. I search the entire house. All of the doors and windows are locked, and the security system shows that not a one had been opened since late that afternoon. I still don't know what it was, but I get goosebumps every time I think about it. When I was 19, I had traveled out to an abandoned hospital with a few friends. We pulled across the street and shut the car off. It was a clear night with only stars and the moon. A house that was on the property's floodlight came on, and we continued talking until my friend stopped, went silent for a few seconds before whispering, "There is someone on top of the car." I go to laugh it off, but when I looked out the window, there was a shadow of a man on my car. I stopped and said, "We are leaving," and hear a loud thud on top of my car. I started the car and drove about 100 feet up before turning around to shine my headlights on the spot we were just parked. There was nobody, nothing in sight. We turned back around and headed for town, talking about what it could have been. I had convinced myself it was a rat or a squirrel that had fallen and landed on the roof before running away. About 10 minutes later, we had pulled into a gas station. I had gotten out of the vehicle to inspect the top. I saw an imprint of feet and fists on top of my car. As none of my friends nor I had left the car, we could not explain what had happened. Making toast late one night, facing the kitchen bench, eating for a good 5 to 10 minutes, cleaned up and turned around, and every single cupboard door and cutlery drawer were open. They were all closed when I went into the kitchen, and there was no way anyone could have snuck in and done it because I was home alone. I also didn't hear them open in the time I was there. Scared the shit out of me, so I froze, let it register for a few seconds, then calmly closed everything and went back to my room to hide until daylight. One of a few weird things to happen growing up. One time I lived in this little apartment building thing in the suburbs. Every time I woke up in the morning, every water faucet in the house would be barely turned on. One particularly insomniac night, I laid awake in my bed. Then, in the corner of my eye, there was this little girl. She quietly whispered, "Water," to me. I could then hear every water faucet in the house barely turning on. I screamed, then looked at where she was before. Wasn't there. Needless to say, I moved out of the house the next week. When I was about 10 years old, I watched the movie The Exorcist for the first time, and creepiest thing ever happened to me. So my mom used to keep this old radio in our kitchen, which was her father's during the war. It never worked, but for sentimental value, she left it on her counter as a reminder of her father. Anyhow, after the movie, I went to the kitchen to make myself a sandwich, and I heard this static noise. Confused, I turned toward the radio and heard whispering of thousands of voices coming from it. I thought to myself, someone must have accidentally turned on Grandpa's radio. Well, I went to go turn it off, and to my surprise and horror, it wasn't plugged in. And no, this radio does not use batteries. It was old. I immediately ran out of the room in fear and told my dad what happened. Confused, he took me to the kitchen and looked at the radio, and it was like it had never happened. He insisted that my mind was playing tricks on me because the movie, but I know what I heard. Still to this day, I wonder what really happened and can never forget the Hellish Voices. My great-grandmother had this house in Mississippi full of cuckoo clocks. Like she was a collector and had roughly 25 to 30 of them in the living room alone. She also collected old bottles, hundreds of them in the attic from the early 1900s. That part is not important other than to give you context that she liked to collect things and wasn't crazy. The one thing she was particular about was having strangers in the house. She hated it. If she didn't know you already, you'd get promptly browbeaten by this angry 90-year-old lady until you left. So it happened to solicitors a few times. Well, when she died, whoever bought the house from the estate turned it into a B&B. The running joke was that we bet she was turning over in her grave at all those strangers sleeping at her house. The clocks and the rest of her stuff went to people in the family. So we're watching the local news one night and see that house, now B&B, caught fire and burned down overnight. When they interviewed the visibly shaken new owner, he said he heard a bunch of cuckoo clocks go off right before the house caught fire. I was visiting with a friend late at night in college at her new rental house for the first time. It was just us two and her brown and white Boston Terrier, Maisie. It was like 2 a.m. and I was getting ready to leave, so I picked up the couple beer cans we had been sipping on to throw them away. I walk around the corner of the living room into the kitchen and crack open the pantry door to get to the trash can. And as I open it, at the bottom of my vision, I see Maisie dart straight into the pantry from under me. I laughed, thinking she was looking for food scraps, so I call out, "No chicken for you, Maisie," as I pull open the door all the way. That's when I froze. The pantry itself was only about 1.5 feet deep, and there was absolutely no room on the floor for a dog to enter all the way inside. There was a bunch of cans down there, and the tiny trash can itself barely fit inside. It would later dawn on me that it would also be physically impossible for a dog to enter the way I saw it enter, both just by the space available to maneuver, and also for the fact it would have to have phased through my legs to even get to the opening. I only had the door cracked 4 to 5 inches and was standing directly in front of it, only barely open enough to reach my hand inside and drop the cans in the trash. I was shocked and chilled when I realized there was no dog inside, and I had just clear as day seen something that wasn't possible. My brain was kind of locked up, so I just stuttered out again, "Maisie?" And then my friend calls from the living room, "Maisie isn't here." I silently did a 360 and studied the entire room around me. I could not find a single thing or angle that could possibly cast some kind of reflection or any type of explanation. While admittedly it was out of the corner of my eye, I saw it clear as day. I can picture it still right now. It was a long-haired, white-looking dog that was probably a bit bigger than Maisie the Boston, and it had a long snout, so it was definitely not the same breed. I go back and tell my friend about what I just saw, expecting her to make fun of me and not believe me. Instead, she gets a concerned look and starts describing to me that since they moved in, Maisie would randomly bark down the end of the hallway sometimes, and follow something around on the floor with her eyes from the couch and get all defensive and alert. My friend was put off by this, as it was clearly weird, and Maisie never used to do anything of the sort. She even said some nights she thought she had heard something that sounded like an animal moving around the house outside her room, but figured it might just be rats or squirrels in the basement. But the real kicker was, when she first moved in, inside the small kitchen drawer was a small, locked wooden decorative box with the word Alfredo on it. And when first discovered, she had picked it up and shook it and said it felt or sounded like sand, so she came to the conclusion that they must have been pet ashes. Now what kind of pet would you name Alfredo if not a small, white dog? I remember I was stone cold sober at that point of the night, as I had quit drinking hours earlier preparing to drive, and I'm not a heavy drinker to begin with. I also frequently would stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. at that time in my life, so 2 a.m. wasn't an hour where I would be bleary-eyed or sleep-deprived. Pretty normal hours for me. I know what I saw that night, and it still gives me the creeps to this day. I have had other paranormal experiences stemming from a childhood home that affected my entire family, but this was the first and only time I have ever actually seen something that was just a straight-up impossibility. There was also a 10-year gap between living in the spooky house and this incident. I'm not one to see a ghost everywhere I go. This was and still is personally shocking for me to have experienced and recollect. I used to hostess at a restaurant that was in one of the oldest buildings in town. It was from the 1600s and had all the original foundation, wood, and stone. It was supposedly haunted, but I didn't believe in ghosts, so I didn't pay attention. However, one day, I was upstairs in the large room, putting silverware out on the tables and lighting the oil lamps. I turned to go to the next table. Everything went fine. I go to the next table, set about placing the utensils, when I hear a metallic thud. I turn and see not one, but all of the silverware from the table had fallen on the carpet floor. Now, I've had a knife or two fall before. The floor is a bit uneven, and the table is shellacked, so it was uneven as well. Add a tablecloth and an impatient hostess, and sometimes they fall. However, there was no way all of the utensils could have fallen. I thought maybe someone was walking in the little kitchenette next door to the room, or was in the small room and caused the floor to vibrate. So I go investigate. No one in the kitchen, no one in the small room, no one upstairs at all. And then I hear a noise. Footsteps. Aha! I follow the steps. They went into this little hallway attached to the large room. The hall is a dead end with a small, and I mean small, bathroom. I walk down to it and go to the bathroom. The door is closed. I knock. No answer. I open the door. No one. Then the damn footsteps again. Now, I'm not scared, more annoyed that one of the waitresses was playing with me. I follow the steps. They go to the small room. I go in. No one is there. I go downstairs thinking I'm hearing someone walking downstairs and it's the sound traveling weird. I see the owner sitting at the bar chatting with the bartender. I look all over the first floor, the bar, dining room, server station, kitchen, walk-in cooler, no one and nothing. Not even the chef had arrived yet. I asked the owner if someone had come in yet. She said no, just me. Annoyed, I go back to the stairs and I hear footsteps again. Determined to catch the culprit, I run up the steps and follow the steps into the large room. No one, but I keep hearing the steps. I also noticed another table's utensils are on the ground, and all of the lamps had gone out. The lamps, which had glass covering the flame to protect them from drafts. 1 or 2 lamps going out, I can contribute to a freak draft or the wick being too wet, but all of them? Nope. I was freaked out enough that I practically ran down the steps and went to the owner. She could tell I was upset. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I keep hearing footsteps upstairs. Is someone here messing with me? They put all the lamps out and keep throwing silverware on the ground." "Huh? Oh, that's just Sarah." I forget what the real name was. "She's the ghost that lives upstairs. She used to work here back when it was a tavern in the 1600s. She's harmless, just likes to pick on people sometimes. Want to meet the ghost boy in the basement?" "Yeah, no thanks." Could it have been a ghost? In the words of my recent Gettysburg ghost tour guide, I don't know, maybe. Could it be explained by psychics and coincidence? I don't know, maybe. All I know is it kept happening in the 2 years I worked there, and it was quite annoying. Well, my creepy crew, that's all for this episode of Miss Story Mysteries, Tales of Mysteries and Oddities. If you have a true experience that you'd like to share, feel free to contact me. And you can help me out tremendously by liking this video, hitting that subscribe button, and sharing with your friends. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay spooky.